Hey guys, welcome back to Conversations with God. Today we have an amazing episode, which Pearl is going to be talking about her favorite characters in people in the Bible. They're not characters; they were actually true people
Actually, people, I like that. Yeah,
in
good
the
correction.
Bible. So last week I spoke about Yael, who is found in the story of Deborah in Judges. And today, Miss Pearl is going to be talking about Pearl.
Ananias,
Yes,
the one
Ananias.
and only.
Well, there's two Ananias. So this Ananias
This
is in
one
the
is
New
the one and only.
the one that did not get struck by by God. So he
Exactly.
was sent by God. So Pearl, I'm excited to hear about the way that you interpret Ananias and Paul.
hmm
So take it away.
All right. Thank you, Esther. And hi, everyone. You know, lovely to be back
Mm-hmm.
and talk about the stories which we are passionate about, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I love the Yael episode that we did last time. I think I know much more about her now than I did before. So thank you for that, Esther.
You're welcome.
Um, all right, and now we are going to go to a New Testament story,
Mm-hmm.
and this takes place in the book of Acts, and Acts is the book which comes right after the Gospels.
Yes.
Um, And as we know by the name, there were lots of miraculous events that took place in this book. And that's why I find it really fascinating. Um, and coming to the story that we are focused on today, it takes place in chapter 9 of the book of Acts. And I know, Esther, you have your Bible ready as well in
Yeah.
case I need some help.
Yes.
Um, but it's and the interesting thing is this Ananias, that is, the person who features in the story appears in just one chapter,
Mm-hmm.
similar to Yael. Maybe Yael was mentioned in another chapter as well, but here you see him, in just one chapter. It starts when this young man called Saul, who is really zealous for God in his own way, in the Jewish um, custom, a very learned person, right, in the scriptures. Um, he,
He wasn't not.
sorry,
Let's just
he, yeah,
at the
yeah,
beginning he wasn't.
yeah, yeah. He was. I guess he thought that he was doing something good,
Yeah.
right, and that's why he was zealous. But he actually ended up persecuting the followers of the way.
Yes.
Um, and possibly this was because he hadn't come across something like this, I think, while he was growing up, going through his rituals, etc. So this was new to him.
Yeah.
And the Bible also says that he was, you know, consenting to the death of Stephen, who was one of the early martyrs or, and disciples of Lord Jesus.
Yeah.
So in chapter 9, Saul, uh, he's seen as a radical person who wants to go to Damascus, right? Probably because there were so many followers there, and bring them back to Jerusalem. So he gets these papers from the high priest, and he has the authority to do so.
Yeah.
So he and a few of his men, they travel to Damascus, and that's he's on a mission, right? He is focused on binding, the people who worship Jesus and bringing them back.
And killing them.
But turns out that God had something else in mind. right? Because just before he enters the gates of Damascus, he sees this bright light around him. Just imagine you're just riding on your horse, right? And suddenly you're in focus because there's something really bright,
Yeah.
and it's coming from heaven. It's not like from a theater stage or anything, right? And then he hears a voice, and that's God's voice saying, why are you persecuting me? And he is so shocked that he falls down, and then he asks this voice who this person is. um, and then Jesus says, I'm Jesus, right? And he is really shocked, right? And then he doesn't know what to do. So he kind of says, what should I do now? And then Jesus gives him an instruction to go into Damascus, right? And then, yeah, just await, next steps, you know. So, and that's what he does. But the interesting thing is that when he gets up, he finds that he can't see even though he opens his eyes. It's almost as if the light has kind of blinded him in
Yeah.
some way, bright light, and then you can't see. So you have, I think he had like two or three people with him, who also heard this voice, right? But they were too scared to kind of do anything, and all they do is to lead him into the city,
Yeah.
right? And then he stays in the house of a person I think called Judas, and yeah, he's there for those 3 days. Um, and the interesting thing is, I was really struck by maybe what he might have gone through in those 3 days, right? Can you imagine? All his life he's thought a certain way, right?
Yeah.
He's thought this is right, this is what I should do. And then suddenly he experiences something like this, right? He must have felt bad, right? He
And
must have
probably
felt
powerless
confused.
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He must have had all of these questions, and you know, he probably mistreated these disciples and followers, and now he must be feeling pretty guilty, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's also why he doesn't eat for 3 days,
Three
you know.
days. He didn't drink anything. He didn't
Yeah,
eat anything for 3 days. Yeah.
yeah. And so that's what he's going through. I think he's feeling pretty bad, um but he's also praying to God,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then God shows him a vision of a man called Ananias who's
Nice.
going to come to him and then lay his hands on him, and he's going to see again. So that tells me something about Saul's character, right? Yes, he probably was feeling bad, he was feeling guilty, but he went back to God in prayer, right? Um, he was still seeking God. And so now enter the hero of our story,
Yes. Ananias.
Ananias, right? So the Bible says that in Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias, right? And one day he just happened to be praying, right? Doing his usual thing. And God speaks to him in a vision and calls out his name. And then Ananias, instantly replies. He says, God, here I am, right? So that tells me a few things about Ananias and Esther. I don't know what you think about that, because you're in prayer often, and you hear from God in different ways, right? But he knew that this was God.
Yeah. Yeah. Ananias definitely had he had a relationship with God, so
Yeah,
he knew God's voice. Well, he knew Jesus' voice because well,
yeah,
God is same Trinity, but he knew Jesus' voice. So and he was also very obedient for him to. I mean, you'll continue with the story, but as as she later on will continue with it, you guys will see that Ananias was very obedient and he trusted the Lord. That's faith, because Mr. Saul was not a nice person. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Um, he did great works and miracles, and I mean, Paul is one of those people that he got the supernatural realm more than the disciples that actually walk with Jesus, in my opinion. But he wasn't. It didn't start off like that. He wasn't a nice person. He persecuted Christians and he killed them. To be honest, he was not. He was evil in the eyes of God. Um, but I mean, there's something about him that I don't know. Like, I think about, like, even though he did those evil things and they were not good, I guess God still saw something in his heart and he used them. So
Yeah.
Ananias was the hero there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, all good points. That's what I was thinking about as well. Um, because Ananias, right? He was quick to respond, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it does seem like this wasn't the first time that he was, you know, answering maybe such a
Yeah.
request or a call from God, right?
Mhm.
So it didn't take him by surprise. You
No.
know, he just said, yes, I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
And God tells him about this man called Saul. And he tells him to go and, put his hands on him so that he can see. Um, and he also tells him that, hey, Saul is praying right now. And he has seen you coming to him in a vision and laying your hands on him. Um, and then Ananias has, I would say, a very valid question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's like, but I have heard about this guy.
Yeah.
So many people, right? Your people. It's not just, others. It's, people who've been praying to you. They have told me about this man, how he persecutes us. And he is here on the authority of the high priest to imprison us, take us away with him, right? So, you know, I mean, he could have been imprisoned, right? That was the real danger that he probably would have thought of as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, and this is where you know when he says this to God, and then that's when God says that he is my chosen vessel, and I have chosen him to take my gospel to the Gentiles, to the Jewish people, to kings, etc. And then he tells him to go, right? So one thing which I think really admired about Ananias here is that he listened to God, right? Versus all the other voices that were telling the truth in a way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm sure there are stories which come to your mind, but the thing which came to my mind was in Numbers 13.
Okay.
When the Jewish spies are sent out to the Promised Land,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they see that it's a wonderful land flowing with milk and honey, and then you have those really huge clusters of grapes. But then they come back, right? And then they do give a negative report, right?
Yeah.
Even though God had sent them, with a purpose that, hey, why will I send you, to just go and spy out the land if I've not made plans to give it to you, right?
Exactly.
But then they just go by the physical strength of the people there.
Right.
And then they dishearten the people, right? And the majority of the people, they listen to these people versus God. And that's why they end up spending like 40 years in the wilderness, right? And
Yeah.
they don't get to the promised land. But with Ananias, he chose to listen to God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the other voices. Um, and he goes, he just instantly gets up and goes, right? And the other interesting point, I think I was, you and I were talking about, Esther, is that Saul is in a place called Straight Street,
Yeah, yeah,
and so many times, like, the names are so significant, right?
yeah.
Because now Saul was going to see straight, he was
Yes.
going to see, straight. Yeah. So I found that really interesting that he happened to be in this place called Straight Street, and it's just amazing how God works things
God is
out.
straight in his life.
Yeah, straight in his life, right? And so our hero Ananias goes straight away to Straight Street, right? And then you know puts
Praise for
his hand on Saul. But what does he say first? He says, "Brother Saul,"
yes,
right? That is big. You are calling your enemy
your
your
brother.
brother,
Yeah,
right? And this isn't like, I know so many of us, we call each other, brother, sister, but, do we really mean it? But I think that he meant it,
yeah.
you know. That was the grace of God, that he was expressing to Saul. And another thing, talking about names, the name Ananias, it means, I made a note, Yahweh has been gracious,
Mm,
right? So
mm.
this is like God's grace going and putting his hands on Saul, right? What do you think Saul must have felt when, the one of the people that, represented those that he persecuted comes to him and then calls him a brother, and shows him kindness.
I mean, I think about the whole situation. I think about what was Saul like. What was his experience? Like, what was he thinking at that time? Because you have to think about it. He had like a supernatural encounter with Christ. Like, Christ was no longer walking on the earth, right? He had already been crucified. He was sent up. He was up with the Father.
Yeah.
So he had like this physical encounter with like Jesus Christ. So I'm pretty sure like in those 3 days that he was without sight, without eating or drinking, I'm pretty sure like his soul was going through a cleanse, right?
Mm,
So now you have this man of God, Ananias, come down and pray for him. I'm sure Saul, he was still Saul. I'm pretty sure he felt, I'm gonna say comfort. I
mm,
feel like he felt comfort because, like I was saying before, I feel like Saul was influenced by maybe culture, um,
mm,
but maybe his heart was in a different place because I don't think Jesus would have had an encounter with him if his heart wasn't. I mean, of course, Jesus is always going to want to have an encounter with with people, right? That's Jesus, but I feel like for Saul, I feel like he did things more because he was influenced by things, uh,
mm,
lied to.
mm.
But like God did with David, like he knows people's heart.
Yeah.
So there was something in his heart that attracted Jesus, even though
Mm,
he was his enemy at the time. So I don't know. I feel like he felt comfort. I really do feel that when Ananias called him brother and prayed for him,
mm.
I feel like it was comfort, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think I would have felt the same. I would have been like, wow, I really persecuted these people. I was mean to them, right? I did bad things to them, and one of them is coming to me and calling me a brother.
mm-hmm.
So that would have, I think, I don't know, maybe melted my heart, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens. So it's just like the vision which God shows Saul, um, that now he's able to see. After Ananias lays his hands on him,
He was
there's something like scales. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, which fall
Like,
from his eyes. And I love, whenever I see words like instantly or immediately in the Bible. I just love seeing that because things happen before you can realize, right?
oh yeah,
um, because in verse 18 it says immediately, right? Immediately there fell from his eyes something like scales, right? And he received his sight at once, right?
yeah,
Again, so you have that word at once. And he arose and was baptized, right? And then that was when he ate, and then he was strengthened, right? So he was strengthened spiritually as well as physically. um, and then this person Saul, who was like the villain, he ends up spending some time with the disciples at Damascus, right?
yeah,
And then there's verse 20. Again, you see immediately he preached Christ in the synagogues, that he is the Son of God. So I just yeah, I just find it very interesting seeing, words like immediately, at once, and, when things happen so soon, you know, before the blink of an eye. Again, you see eye and blink and all that. But yeah, that's the story of Ananias, and you don't really see or hear about him, after this. After this, we get to know that Saul is now called Paul. You know, he he's completely transformed,
yeah,
into a new person. Um, and the grace of God, right? So grace is like the unmerited, unearned favor of God.
yes,
That's what he received. That's what he received, when he got his sight, when his path was straightened, and he went on, I think, to like become one of the greatest uh,
apostle,
proponents of
yeah,
grace,
yeah,
and writers of it as well.
yeah,
So yeah, and that was thanks to a hero like Ananias.
yeah. I love that story. Even like thinking about it now, um, that was like after like Paul had the encounter with Christ. Um, Ananias, like when you have that encounter with someone else like that, I could even probably imagine that Paul even felt protected or even comforted or even saw Ananias as maybe even as a father figure. I mean, I don't know how old. It
Yeah,
doesn't talk about Ananias' age or even Paul's age, but I don't think maybe age matters here. This was someone that was advanced in faith with God, and someone that like knew when God moved, like heard his voice, and just to know that Ananias, that Paul was had the encounter with Ananias, I'm pretty sure he felt um kind of even protected, like how a child feels protected by their
yeah,
father, you know.
yeah,
Uh, I'm pretty sure he was very moved. And I don't know, for some reason I feel like it was a renewing, like those 3 days that he without seeing, without eating, or
yeah,
like there was a renewing of his spirit that was going on. Like literally being born again. And there's something so significant about three, right? So like Jesus rose on the third day. Um, and it's like Ananias, he was dead, literally, and then
yeah,
spiritually, and on that third day, it was like he was revived again by Ananias. And so yeah, it's a great story. Thank you for sharing that so much. I don't know if you want me to share what God gave me about the word now or later. I don't know. What do you think we should?
yeah. I think it'll be appropriate to share now. Yeah.
Yeah. So Pearl and I were talking a while back about, people in the Bible that we really love, that don't get a lot of the spotlight because you don't really know much about them. Um, a couple years ago, I would say maybe 2019. It was before the pandemic hit. I was in church, um, and there's a lot of things going on in the world, and especially here, like in the United States, so many things going on. And the one of the pastor's wife um was asked to pray for our city and our nation, and she did. And in that prayer, she said, I don't remember, I'm gonna paraphrase. She said, we live in such an evil world, and there's a lot of evil people, and just praying for protection. Like, we live in such an evil world. Like, she kept on saying evil world.
Mm.
And I understood what she was trying to say, but for some reason it kind of like, I don't want to say it rubbed me off the wrong way, but it was a little concerning to me.
Mm.
But I understand what she is saying. We live in a very corrupt world where there is people that do a lot of evil things, people that are used by the enemy, um, for whatever reason. People live in different circumstances. There's a lot of violence, a significant of things, infinite of
Yeah.
things. So, but on my way out, I was walking towards the bus, and it was quite a
Mm.
walk. And I'm always in conversation with God. And I was just talking to him, and I was like, well, I was kind of like thinking about the prayer.
Mm.
And I heard him say, she thinks the world is evil because um they have not met an Ananias. And no,
Wow.
the conversation was, I don't remember all, like I have it written down.
Mm.
The conversation started, I was walking towards the bus, and the conversation started with Paul.
Mm.
God's asked me a question about Paul, and it was something like, "Do you remember Paul?" I'm like, "Yeah, Paul from the Bible." Like, yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Like, I know who Paul
Mm.
is. And I remember him saying that Paul was a ISIS was like the ISIS of that time. And I
Wow.
said, "Okay, God, like, so what are you trying to say?" Um, and then he said the reason that she thinks, that she believes that the world is so evil, is because they are the Ananias to a Paul.
Mm.
So I was like, "Okay, God, give me more. Like, what are you trying to say?" And what he was trying to say is that these people that are doing like these evil things
Yeah.
have not met an Ananias, that we are an Ananias to those
Wow.
people.
Mm.
So instead of us saying, this is so bad or this is so evil, it's like, come into relationship with God, come into one with God, and sometimes he's gonna ask you to go places, um,
Yeah.
just like he did to Ananias. Um,
Mm.
so that was kind of like the whole gist of the conversation, and I have it written down some in my notebook. But I just wanted to share that because I felt like it was so significant and so powerful that he was talking about Paul, and how
Yeah.
Paul was he Paul was not he was not a nice person. He was not, before that encounter with Ananias and with Jesus. He wasn't.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be a lot of places that God is gonna call us, and we
Yeah.
are the Ananias to that Saul. So yeah, that's just wanted
Wow.
to encourage you guys. Uh and that it's scary. I'm not gonna lie, it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we need to have faith like Ananias, because that was faith. That really
I
was.
know.
That really was faith. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to share that a little bit, and I'll probably just talk about it more later on. I'll just review my notes a little bit, but that was the conversation, that we are Ananias to us all. So yes.
Wow. Wow. No. Yeah, that kind of that resonates with me. And I think so many times, maybe it's not something as extreme as what Ananias did in Acts, but it could also be that sometimes when you're praying or you just find yourself thinking about someone, maybe, and sometimes I've just reached out to that person,
Yeah.
maybe I'd not thought about that person in a while or spoken to that person, and I find that they maybe they were going through something, or they were thinking about me as well, at
Yes.
that point. So I think those kind of things happen too,
Yeah.
and yeah, we should be
Yeah.
like sensitive to that.
Oh yes. Oh yes. So yeah. So what's next, Miss Pearl? So are we
Next, yeah, I think it's a good time to close. Give our audience time to think about this story. I'm sure y'all have probably read this, and please let us know in the comments what you'll
yeah.
think about this story, and what God has, spoken to you in terms of Ananias, and how relevant he is, in our times and in this age. So, would love to hear that. And with that, I think we can close and, you know, see you all next time.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It was and a very exciting story. I love Ananias and his bravery and his courage. So I thank you for that teaching. It was amazing. So with that being said, we are gonna close out and we will be seeing you guys next week. Please comment below, let us know. Let's just share. Let's just continue
Yeah.
the conversation and continue to share how we kind of interpret the story as well. That's really interesting to see. So with that being said, we love you guys. Take care. God bless. Hope you guys have an amazing week and we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
We are out.